These are my top 10 hikes on Oahu, Hawaii. So Oahu, Hawaii is a true mecca for hikers. It is probably my favorite place I've ever gone for hiking, which is great news for you, but not so great for me because it makes it impossibly hard to organize these from first being the best to 10th being the last, but hey, we gotta start somewhere. So let's start with probably the most popular hike on all of Oahu, which is Diamond Head. Now Diamond Head is about 1.9 miles out and back, and it is definitely easy to moderate. Some people say moderate, I think it's more easy personally, and it is definitely touristy. Nowadays you actually have to make a reservation to hike Diamond Head, which can take away maybe a little bit of the magic, but that's okay. It's still a really cool trail. It's paved, which makes it very family friendly, or maybe for those of you who aren't quite as outdoorsy, no problem. It has some changing scenery going up this, the crater, which Diamond Head crater is actually an old volcano, which is now just a crater. And you go through a tunnel, which is really cool. Then you get to elevated area, going up some stairs, eventually getting some really amazing views of Waikiki City, the beach, the coast, and some of the mountains on the east side and south shore of the island. So it's a really good introductory hike, but there are many that I think are even better, quite a bit better actually, that we'll get into. But hey, Diamond Head, it's great, it's convenient, you can walk there from Waikiki, you can easily take a bus, so it's a really great starting off place. And if you're not a super avid hiker, maybe I don't know why you clicked on this video, but hey, here you go. Let's get on to number 9. So hike number 9 is PU'U, aka the Pink Pillbox hike, which is actually located on the west side of the island, which is a little bit further away, but definitely worth considering going to. The hike itself is 1.6 miles out and back. It's probably easy to moderate, definitely a little bit harder than Diamond Head, but definitely a lot less touristy, being on the west side of the island, which is a lot less visited. The hike itself goes up a mountain where you go, it's kind of like switching back and forth. The scenery doesn't change a lot. You get some nice views of the surrounding mountains and area until you eventually get to the top of a ridge, arriving at the Pink Pillbox itself. And in case you aren't aware, pillboxes are a really neat thing. A lot of them have hikes to get to, and they are lookout bunkers that were actually made originally for World War II to be sort of lookout areas during the war for obvious reasons if you know what happened at Pearl Harbor. If not, newsflash, I'm not here to educate you about that, but did a little bit of research and you might realize it's a pretty big deal. Anyway, the hike itself is really cool. The views are great. You can see the beach and coast and the mountains on the west side, and it definitely really feels a little bit more authentic and less touristy, and a cool little pillbox hike, but there are more hikes to get to that blow this one out of the water, again, in my opinion. So let's move on to hike number 8. Which couldn't be more different, which is Kaena Point. Kaena Point is located on the north, sort of like northwest part of the island. I recommend hiking it from the North Shore area via the Farrington Highway. And the hike itself is 5 miles long, and it is easy. It's the definition of easy because it's not really a hike, it's more of like a flat walk along the coast, which is really cool, really beautiful. You're right up against the mountains and the ocean on the other side. But the main draw of this hike for me is the wildlife watching component, because here you can see a lot of whales during the right time. You can see maybe some dolphins from shore. You can see these albatross birds once you get to the end of the Kaena Point. But the hike itself, it's very long. It's even longer than 5 miles, I think personally, if you go like the full distance. And there's little to no shade along the entire hike, so you'll be roasting in the sun. Bring lots of water. Even though it's flat, you might find yourself very exhausted very quickly. For all of these reasons, it's a really cool spot, but as a hike, maybe it doesn't rank as highly compared to the others for that reason. So let's move on to hike number 7. Which is another pillbox hike, being LANIKAI Pillbox hike. Now this hike is only about 0.9 miles out and back, so it's very short and very easy. And it pains me to put it so low because I love LANIKAI and the views at the top, which we'll talk about in a minute, because to get to the final viewpoint, the pillbox, you hike up this ridge where it's a little bit steep. It's not too bad. You might need to take a couple breaks, but hey, being that it's such a short hike, you know, even like 2 or 3 breaks is all you'll need to get up there. And once you get there, the views are magical. I love this pillbox and the views where you can see the MOKULUA Island off of LANIKAI Beach. And the MOKULUA islands plural, are these 2 little twin islands, which you can actually kayak to if you're interested, which makes another really fun adventure, because if you're watching a hiking video, chances are you love a good adventure like me, myself. And this hike would definitely be rated even higher than number 7 if I incorporate the sunrise component, because this is an amazing sunrise spot because you face the east, well, the east, not the East Coast, the east in general. and East Coast. So you get an amazing view of the sun rising right next to the MOKULUA Islands, which is the perfect way to start the day. You can also see 3 peaks right off in the distance in the OLAU Mountains, even a little bit further. So I just love the east side of Oahu so much, but the hike isn't that long, it's not that much of an adventure, and it's definitely a busier, popular place. So it won't feel as authentic in that sort of sense, but it's a really cool spot and a really great hike that I couldn't recommend enough. And of course, do it for sunrise if you can. It's worth suffering and getting up early for, especially if you're jet lagged. Hike number 6. It's definitely touristy, it's definitely well known, but for good reason, and I really recommend you do it, which is Koko Head Crater. Now this is 1.6 miles out and back, and it is challenging. It's so challenging, some people view it as like a workout or sort of, a fitness challenge rather than an actual like hiking adventure itself. Because Koko Head Crater, it used to be a volcano similar to Diamond Head, but it's no longer active, which is great because we can now hike it. But the method of hiking is a little bit different because you're going to go up an old tramway, which essentially makes it like a Stairmaster, like 1,000 stairs, getting progressively steeper to finally reach the top of the crater itself. I think it's really fun though. It's not too long up, which makes it easy to take a few breaks, or quite a few breaks, and still not spend forever doing this hike. And there's some shade along the way, which makes it, more bearable probably. Once you get to the top though, the views are astounding. You can see HANAUMA Bay, which is a really great snorkeling spot, which looks really beautiful from up above, I must say. You can see other parts of the island, including Diamond Head, which maybe you already hiked before. You can see a little bit of Waikiki, some of the other mountains and the coastline, and the crater itself, which is really beautiful and vast. So it's a really great hike. It's definitely popular, it's definitely difficult, but I think it's a really great bang for your buck because it's still less than 2 miles and you get some astounding views. I really can't talk them up enough. And once you get to the top, there are also some pillboxes for you to explore and look in, and it just gives that authentic Oahu, Hawaii feel that the pillboxes, they don't really exist in any other place. I don't know. Let me know if there's any pillboxes on the other islands, because I've yet to visit them, and at this rate, I'm gonna visit them like tomorrow, because Hawaii is just so freaking gorgeous, everybody. Number 5, this is going to be our first waterfall hike of this video, which is WAIAKEAKUA Falls. No, just a little bit of a clue. I said the first, so something good is coming later. No, WAIAKEAKUA Falls is very difficult to say, but not as difficult to hike. It's about 2.4 miles there and back, and it's a little bit moderate. There's a challenging, really steep section, which on a muddy day could be a bit of a nightmare, because you start off a little bit higher in this neighborhood, and then you go down towards the river, of course, because that's where you will get towards the waterfall. All of a sudden, this easy hike entered hard mode. It is ridiculously steep, a little bit muddy and slippery, so be careful, but I can hear water below. Looks absolutely gorgeous down there. Lots of jungly plants, but should be worth it because you get to hop in a waterfall at the end. But this is more about the journey for this hike. You go through this really beautiful, lush sort of jungle, honestly. It reminded me of some parts of like the Yucatan Peninsula that I visited with the sort of plants you see towards the river at the bottom, because it's where all the rain collects. So it's incredibly lush, which means it's gonna be a little bit mosquito-y, but it's an extremely fun adventure. And then you will eventually reach the waterfall itself, which to be honest, isn't like the waterfall that's blown me away the most throughout all my travels, but it's cool to see a waterfall in Hawaii, and there's some pools for you to cool off and swim in and just chill at and enjoy before you make the trek back towards the top through that really steep section we talked about earlier. All right, a lot of sweat and a lot of mud later, we have made it to WAIAKEAKUA Waterfall. Definitely really technical hike, lots of scrambling and tough stuff. I actually had to go up the side of the smaller waterfall to get here. Really pretty, very known here. It's a really fun option. Definitely we're less tourists here than some of the other places I visited. Makes you feel like you really are in a tropical paradise, jungle, island that Oahu definitely is. Now, number 4, this is the shortest hike on this entire list, but it's definitely not the easiest in some ways, which is going to be Crouching Lion. Now, Crouching Lion is a little bit out of the way. It's like in the north, sort of eastern part of the island, but it's a really pretty drive to get here, and the hike itself is only about 0.6 miles round trip if you do this little loop that I recommend you do, starting up one way and coming down the other. But it is moderate to maybe a tiny bit difficult because it's incredibly steep and you gotta be really careful with your footing here. Wear good shoes or don't do it if it's too slippery. Beautiful, but ridiculously steep. The hike itself, to me, felt more of like a really cool spot. That being said, there are some cool adventurous sections where you're exposed and you get some great views constantly. You just turn around behind you and be like, oh wow. Then you turn around again and you're like, oh my God. Then you turn around again and you're your mind is freaking blown because the views here are incredibly beautiful. You see this little beach sort of cove section and these massive mountains that looks like you can almost reach out and touch them. And then you see this valley off to the west, which is incredibly beautiful. Definitely a different part of the island too than these other ones we talked about. And yeah, what more can I say, guys? Crouching Lion, it's gorgeous. It's a really cool spot, but there's actually one more thing I can say. This is a sacred spot to Hawaiian people, so be very courteous and be very careful. Don't visit this one little part here because this is more like reserved, I think is like a burial place or a sacred place towards like the actual like Hawaiian people that lived here before, you know, Americans came and decided to make it one of our states, which hey, we're blessed to call it one of our states, but keep in mind that it still has a really strong attachment to the local Hawaiian people. So that being said, let's move on to hike number 3. Which is LULUMAHU Falls, which is the second and final waterfall on this list. Now, LULUMAHU Falls Trail is about 1.6 miles, or so they say. To me, it felt a little bit closer to 2. Or if you're like Vanessa and I, maybe it's closer to 3 because it felt like we were constantly getting lost. Because the trail isn't that well marked. You have to follow these ribbons and you go through a bamboo forest, which is really amazing and beautiful, but definitely feels like you get lost easily, which yeah, we did again. But once you pass through the bamboo forest, which I really must stress is like one of the coolest features of this hike. I haven't been on a hike like this anywhere in my life where you go through a bamboo forest, not as like a tourist attraction, but as an actual like adventure and like hike, you know? So that's a really cool thing. But once you pass through it, you will get some views, a little bit of views of the exposed like mountains around you, but then you'll head back into the forest, which is really nice and quiet. There's a stream. It's a little bit of like scrambling. The trail isn't that clearly marked again, but you will eventually reach LULUMAHU Falls themselves, which are quite beautiful. They're not my like favorite waterfalls I've ever seen in my life, but they're definitely the prettiest I've seen in Oahu. Really nice, and there's a nice little pool for you to cool off or wait around that you could do if you're interested in, and it's a really nice spot to just soak in and enjoy before you make the trek back towards the beginning of LULUMAHU Falls, hopefully to not get lost again. I don't know, guys, there's a waterfall in Hawaii. What more can I say? Anyway, let's move on to hike number 2. Which pains me to put at number 2 because this honestly could be number 1 for many reasons, which is going to be OLOMANA, aka the infamous 3 Peaks hike. Now, OLOMANA is 3 peaks, but I really only recommend hiking to the first, which I'll talk about for more reasons. And the hike to the first is about 1.5 miles there, so 1.5 miles back, that's 3 miles in total, and this is difficult. Not just like steep where, you know, you're gonna be out of breath, but really technical towards the end where you have some really steep ridges where you need to use some ropes to go. And there's some that are like straight vertical where it feels like you're doing like a beginner rock climbing class. That being said, it's not all that difficult. It's just like, you know, not just walking. It's a little bit of climbing and you have to be careful. And then once you get past that part, you will have some unbelievable views. The journey itself is really fun because you start off in this like secluded sort of forest with this clay sort of like red clay sort of surface that you're hiking along, and then the views eventually open up. You go through that really technical section we just talked about, and then the views just explode open where you're on this kind of narrow ridge with this really steep drop off, which is really terrifying, but really freaking cool. So there you have it. You're at Mount OLOMANA. You get amazing views of the East Coast. You get amazing views of the OLAU mountains right nearby, and the second and third peaks right in front of you. If you are extremely brave and extremely confident in your abilities, not just like physically, but like climbing and maneuvering, then maybe you want to go on and pursue those. But personally, I felt the first peak was more than enough. It was really scary, it was really difficult, but extremely exhilarating. But other people have lost their lives on this hike, maybe because they overestimated their abilities, or a freak accident occurred, or the weather conditions weren't the best. Either way, only do this hike if you are confident, and only do the second and third ones if you are extremely confident. Because hey, just doing the first peak will be exhilarating and enough of an amazing memory and experience. So don't do anything crazy, but let's move on to hike number 1. Which is the KULI Ridge Trail. Now, KULI Ridge is about 4.4 miles, or so they say, maybe it's a little bit further. Some of these I'm doubtful, but I don't know. And it is moderate difficulty, maybe a little bit challenging at the end, but it's definitely, you know, not nearly as difficult as 3 peaks we just talked about. And KULI Ridge is amazing for a multitude of reasons. Number 1, this definitely feels like a true hike, a true trek where you're in the wilderness, away from everything, and there is a bunch of different like changes of scenery where it feels like you're going through 4 4 little microclimates. One like normal forest, one like pine forest, then one that's kind of like a mixture of like a pine forest and like a fern forest you'd see in the PNW, and then you get to this like ridge area which feels like a tropical rainforest or a little bit jungly, where you go on this ridge where the views again explode open, and you have some stunning views of the valley below you on one side. That's like the south shore of the island, where you see some other notable things we've talked about before, including like Diamond Head and Koko Head. Then once you get to the actual top and end of the trail, you'll have some amazing views of the other side of the valley below you, and you will see countless other like places like the MOKULUA Islands, LANIKAI, this little bird sanctuary island right off the distance, and it is extremely gorgeous. It's a true adventure. I've done this hike numerous times and loved it each and every time. I couldn't recommend it enough, and it is definitely a lot more safe and a lot less difficult than Three Peaks. So that's probably why I put it at number 1. It's really hard to juggle those two, but anyway, that is my number 1 hike that you have to do on Oahu, Hawaii. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 hikes on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. I loved each of these hikes, and to be honest, it was very difficult to organize like 7 of them. Maybe like my least favorite and like my top 2 are easy, but the rest of them I could like choose a different one on a different day because they offer so many different amazing things. It really depends on if you like views, if you like being secluded, if you like water, if you like jungle, if you like wildlife, you know, pick and choose those based on your own criteria. Also, I really recommend using the app AllTrails, not only to get like this information that I used on this video for difficulty and length, but also people can post in real time the trail conditions with pictures and reviews, because on a tropical island, the conditions can vary depending on if there's a lot of rain recently or if a trail is closed, because that can definitely happen. I wanted to hike this beautiful waterfall called Mauna, but it was closed my entire time I was in Oahu, so I definitely want to go back and try that one as well. That being said, there are so many more hikes for you to explore and discover on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. So let me know if you have a favorite that was not mentioned on this video, or let me know your own thoughts, opinions, or any of these hikes, ones you want to do while you're going to be in Oahu. I'd love to hear from you all. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the rest of my Oahu content, because hey, I'm sure you're not just going to want to hike. You're going to want to probably go on the beach too and cool off after all that, you know, hiking you've been doing, or you want to indulge with some food and like, you know, re-up those calories you just burned off. So check those out. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in the next video. Peace.